Somewhere between the Brickyard 400 at Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Cookout 400 at Richmond Raceway, every car in the NASCAR Cup Series got a new piece of metal bolted to its nose. NASCAR never announced it. There was no press release, no memo circulated to the media, and no headline anywhere. The parts simply appeared, starting at North Wilkesboro Speedway. And the teams installed it because they were instructed to. Most fans never learned it existed. Inside the garage, however, crew members began discussing it almost immediately. 2 weeks later, Joey Logano won a race and explained on camera exactly what that piece of metal had taken away from somebody else. Then Dale Earnhardt Jr. sat down and asked the question that nobody has been able to answer cleanly since. If the change did what some drivers believe it did, the fastest manufacturer of the 2026 season may have quietly lost the one thing that made it fastest. If it did not, then nothing changed at all, and the past month of racing has a far simpler explanation. Start with where things stood before any of this happened. Toyota has been the most dominant manufacturer in the NASCAR Cup Series this season, and the margin was not narrow. Plenty of conspiracy theories were attached to that dominance, most of them surrounding the 2311 Racing lawsuit victory against NASCAR. But the pattern resembled the normal cyclical run that manufacturers move through over time. There was also a straightforward technical reason for the gap. Chevrolet rolled out a brand new body for the 2026 season and spent months working through documented balance problems with it. That effectively removed one of the three manufacturers from serious contention. It left Ford as the only realistic challenger to Toyota until Chevrolet could resolve the issues in its own cars. For most of the season, Ford was not close enough to challenge anyone at all. Then, at the end of July, a comment on a podcast set off a search for answers among fans. Mamba Smith was speaking about Team Penske and specifically about Joey Logano. On that week's edition of Kevin Harvick's Happy Hour, he mentioned something small, almost in passing. I know there was a little adjustment with the nose of the car with the splitter that they feel like might help their program out a little bit when it comes to downforce, said Smith of Team Penske. He followed it with a warning directed at everyone racing against Logano. So we'll see, but do not let Logano hang around. Then he explained the reasoning behind that warning. You let people hang around that you're supposed to beat, and then they end up coming back and smacking you in the face. And then it's too late. Fans latched onto one phrase in all of that, and it was not the warning. It was the adjustment with the nose of the car. The question landed with Bob Pockrass of FOX Sports, who was asked directly on social media on July 30 to clarify what Smith had been referring to. The question came to him through the Team Blaney account, which asked whether he had any insight into the comment and whether it involved helping the Ford cars with downforce. Pockrass answered, and his reply is the factual spine of this entire story. According to his explanation, a flex in the splitter had been discovered by Toyota, and as a result, every team was required to add struts to the front of the car to stop the splitter from moving. Starting with North Wilkesboro, the teams had to add some struts to the front of the splitter that should keep it from moving/deforming while at speed, tweeted Pockrass. He also made clear that opinion inside the sport was divided on how much it mattered. Whether that was a significant advantage Toyota found is debatable in the garage, he wrote, adding that Toyota was still strong at Indianapolis. That is the entire rule change. Struts, small metal supports, added to the front of every car in the field. Here is why a part that small can carry that much weight. The splitter is the flat panel that extends forward along the bottom of the nose of the car. It functions like a blade. It cuts through the oncoming air and forces the front of the car down toward the racing surface. The lower and flatter that blade sits while the car is traveling at speed, the more grip the driver has at the front of the car through the corner. Because of that direct relationship, even a very small amount of movement in the splitter changes how much downforce the car generates and how quickly it can rotate through a turn. A part that shifts under aerodynamic load is no longer the same part it was while sitting still in the garage. That mechanism sits at the center of every claim made in the weeks that followed. Brad Keselowski saw the explanation from Pockrass and responded publicly. This didn't really get any media play but was a big deal emo, Keselowski tweeted. That response carries weight for two specific reasons. First, Keselowski finished inside the top 10 in both of the races run immediately after the change was implemented, so he was not a driver reaching for an explanation after a poor result. Second, he is not only a driver, he is also a team owner, which places him on both sides of the technical conversation, with access to the engineering discussion as well as the driver's seat. When someone in that position states publicly that a quiet parts change was a big deal, the story moves out of speculation and into something worth examining closely. Then came Richmond Raceway on August 15, 2026. Joey Logano, driving the number 22 Shell Pennzoil Ford, won the Cookout 400. It was his second victory of the season. Ford led the field that night, and Chase Briscoe finished second for Toyota. Afterward, Jordan Bianchi of The Athletic asked Logano whether he now felt like a genuine threat to win a fourth championship, pointing specifically at speed on the intermediate tracks. Logano did not sidestep the question. "I feel much better about it," Logano said. Then he identified the reason. "Some of the rules that have been changed recently I think helped us some, kind of brought some of the guys that were taking advantage of some of that stuff more back towards us. I think that helped." Consider the middle of that sentence again. Some of the guys who were taking advantage of some of that stuff. That is a race winner stating on camera that another group of teams possess something and no longer possesses it. Jordan Bianchi later added his own reporting on the Teardown podcast, and his account attached names to the story for the first time. He explained that the front splitter on some of the cars had been shifting slightly in the airflow at speed. NASCAR then intervened around the time of the North Wilkesboro race weekend and mandated that teams brace and stabilize the component so that it could not be manipulated and could not move with the air in a way that produced an edge. Bianchi also included the qualifier that matters most in this entire discussion. No team was found to be breaking any rule. NASCAR introduced the change as part of its ongoing effort to police how the cars performed under the conditions. The previous splitter setup, according to that reporting, had been closely linked to Toyota teams from Gibbs Racing and 2311 Racing. Officials did not report any violations against anyone. That brings the story to Dale Earnhardt Jr., who supplied the detail that nobody else had placed on record. He began by accepting that the schedule theory has merit before pivoting to the technical explanation. "That's one train of thought, and I think that's partly true," Earnhardt Jr. said. "The other thing is, and Joey Logano mentioned this, NASCAR made a change to some of the struts at the front splitter." Then he described what the teams were actually doing with the cars themselves. The teams, to maximize aero on this car, the teams kind of make the car like a banana, and there were some ways that the teams were if you would walk through the garage anytime before the race. And the teams had the cars up in the air on jack stands. They also have jacks underneath the front splitter. That detail is the center of the whole story. Jacks placed underneath the nose of a car while it sits elevated on jack stands, holding the splitter in one exact position before the car has turned a lap. Earnhardt Jr. explained the purpose of that arrangement. And that is to keep that in a certain position so that it'll go through tech and pass, but as the weekend goes, that all starts to settle into where they want it to go. He then described what happens once the car leaves the garage and reaches the racing surface. The car goes out on the track, and it runs, and things move and twist and carry on, and the car kind of moves into what positions that they want it to be in. The car passes technical inspection in one shape. Across the course of the weekend, it gradually becomes a different shape. Earnhardt Jr. also described how NASCAR responded to the rumblings inside the garage, and the language was blunt. NASCAR stated that it would put a stop to it. Because we think some teams are doing it better than others, or maybe some manufacturers are doing it better than others, I don't know. He continued. But NASCAR decided to change how that front structure on the splitter is held in place, and that took some of that sort of banana effect out of the cars. That's the idea. He then polled people inside the garage and received 2 different answers, which is precisely why this story has no clean resolution. "And I talked to some people in the garage, and some said it won't change anything," he said. Others told him it could change how certain teams were using the effect to their advantage. Then Earnhardt Jr. applied the brakes to the entire theory. Because a simpler explanation is available. "Have they turned it around?" he asked of Ford. So there's a couple trains of thought here. Are they just going to racetracks where the advantage that the Toyotas had throughout the season? He then listed the venues involved. We figured so you got tracks like Richmond, Wilkesboro, Loudon, New Hampshire, Phoenix, Martinsville. The Fords are better. And he completed the thought. They've always been great or good at those racetracks. Are we just at the part of the season where we're going to racetracks where the advantage isn't quite as big? Chase Briscoe made the same observation independently after North Wilkesboro, noting that 3 of the final 5 races of the regular season were scheduled at tracks measuring less than a mile. All of them inside the wheelhouse of the lead Ford team. There's a lot of short tracks coming up. We have to step our game up, Briscoe said, adding that his group needed to be slightly better than where it sat on the intermediate tracks. The results support that caution, because Toyota has not disappeared since the struts arrived. At North Wilkesboro, Toyota held 4 of the top 6 positions, including 2nd through 4th. Denny Hamlin finished runner-up, and his assessment afterward was direct. Just a smidge off, Hamlin told TNT Sports. He collected his league-leading 11th top 5 finish of the 2026 campaign and extended his regular season championship lead to 68 points over Tyler Reddick. Ty Gibbs finished 4th after winning the opening stage and then being caught speeding on pit road during the stage break, which dropped him to the rear of the field for the restart. Christopher Bell placed 19th after fighting brake problems for much of the evening, despite appearing to be the class of the field during practice on Saturday. At Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Toyota finished 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th in the Brickyard 400, a race won by Corey Heim, the youngest Brickyard winner since Jeff Gordon in 1994. At Iowa, Toyota again produced the winner along with several cars inside the top 6. Even at Richmond, where Logano won, Chase Briscoe finished 2nd, Denny Hamlin finished 5th, and Christopher Bell finished 7th. Ford has clearly improved as well. At North Wilkesboro, Ford had 5 of the top 11 finishers. Logano led 323 of 450 laps at the historic .625-mile short track and won by .859 seconds, ending a 45-race winless run dating back to the previous May at Texas Motor Speedway. The finish came down to a pit sequence in which Chris Gale, crew chief of the number 11 car, undercut Paul Wolfe on the number 22 car by 1 lap before Logano rejoined narrowly ahead of Hamlin and reclaimed the lead with 70 laps remaining. At Indianapolis, Logano finished 3rd, Ford placed 4 cars inside the top 8, and 7 Ford cars finished inside the top 15. Both of those venues, however, are tracks where Ford has historically performed well, which is exactly the point Earnhardt Jr. raised. So he offered the only real test available. Send these boys to 1.5 miles, then I'll be able to tell you a little bit more, he said. He then described precisely what would convince him. If you send them all out to 1.5 mile racetrack where the Toyotas have just been really strong and the Fords are running up front or leading or running well, and it's a mixed bag of manufacturers in the top 5, then I'm more to think that it's that change that NASCAR made. He added one further line, allowing that part of the shift may simply be gains made by the Ford teams themselves. The structural fact behind his test is straightforward. The notable Toyota advantage this season has come on the intermediate tracks, and NASCAR has not raced on one since the struts were mandated. Loudon comes next, followed by Daytona International Speedway to close the regular season, and neither venue settles the argument. Daytona in particular is decided by wrecks, timing, and fuel strategy rather than by aerodynamic advantage. The intermediate tracks live in the playoffs, which means the answer to the question Dale Earnhardt Jr. asked, does not arrive during a quiet summer weekend. It arrives with the championship on the line, on the exact tracks where Toyota built this entire season. Till then, the garage remains split, no violations have been reported against any team or manufacturer, and the schedule itself will decide who was right.